you're in the right place. Dr. Kris Wusterhausen has been in your shoes, and he's done the work and can show you how you can turn things around. In this podcast, he'll share his personal stories and advice on how to create the life you want for yourself as a provider and as a business person. You'll learn how to reclaim your life, your time, your energy, and most of all, reclaim the dream you had when you started your journey to become a doctor. Welcome to the Dr. Kris Podcast. Welcome back, everybody, to the Dr. Kris Podcast, where we get to talk with Dr. Kris and kind of learn about his journey from traditional medicine to a cash pay practice. It seems like there's a lot of things that are involved in that. And so Dr. Kris will like sharing his journey, and it's really interesting. Dr. Kris, welcome. How are you?
I'm good. It hasn't gotten too hot yet today, so life is good in Texas.
Yeah, you've been making some trips to Nashville to your coming soon new location.
Yeah, we're actually headed out there again in 2 days.
Well, that's exciting. So today, it's like we've been, our first episode here talking about this specific journey. We were talking about the fear of the unknown, and when a physician like you recognizes that maybe the path they're on in this traditional medicine practice is not tenable, that at some point you're going to wear out. And so you talked about the fear of the unknown when you start to gradually change over from that model. And then last week we talked about financial hurdles. What are some of the most surprising things about it, the location, equipment. And so today what I wanted to learn is let's talk about the benefits of your experience when you had to be kind of brave. You had to step out on something that was new, not guaranteed. You're going from this very busy practice to this, you're envisioning this new practice that you're doing. So what were some of the benefits that you experienced?
I just think the immediate benefit is, even though you're stressed with a new practice, and that's certainly going to happen no matter what you do, it's a different kind of stress. It's just the stress of that every day. We used to call it our old clinic that we used to work at. I had another doctor that actually joined me temporarily there. He was relocating his practice from another state, and he needed somewhere to practice for a few months, and he joined our practice while his clinic was opening, because at that time we were a provider short. And he said, man, working here is like working in a MASH unit. It's just like all day long. It's like, what are you going to get hit with next? And, I always joked it could have been a reality TV show. You just never knew what the next room was going to bring. So there was just always that stress of like, and then just the stress of how can I help this person? Because again, I was probably in the most severe situation of polar opposite situations with these two clinics. I was in the county clinic that was indigent patients, Medicare, Medicaid, very ill patients. I think I've said on a prior podcast, even the internal medicine doctors referred patients to our clinic because they were too complex for their practice. And here I am, just a family practice doc. And in our hierarchy, they're supposed to be taking the more complex patients. So just kind of an everyday thing. So just the stress of actually walking into a room and, for the most part, seeing what I would in my old practice would have been very healthy patients compared to the average. Just that stress of like, oh my God, I can actually now take a breath and actually think about what this person needs to do to stay well or to somewhat improve their health, versus how do I keep this person alive for the next 3 months? Because, they got everything wrong with them, from heart disease to diabetes to high blood pressure to have already had 3 heart attacks. No day was promised for these people. And so that's the biggest thing that was different, is just, it was like, that old saying, it was like 50 pounds or 100 pounds is lifted off your shoulders, because you could really treat the patient and maybe or at least not maybe, for me was the actual way I wanted to treat the patients from the beginning, which was, really dive in and see what I could do to truly change their health. Nothing makes me happier. We love patients when we get them and they have chronic medical problems and we're able to reverse those things. But I think what gives me the most pleasure now is just keeping my patients from ever getting those chronic diseases. And like I always tell I tell my friends, my mom, she's 85 years old. She lives in a nursing home here in town. We've had a stressed relationship might be the term I would use. And she always, every time I see her, I go see her, not every time, but nearly every time, she always tells me how I'm going to get this disease or that disease because she's got this disease or that disease. And I try to explain to her that the reason she thinks genetics is the cause for all of these conditions, when actually it was inactivity, poor diet, and just not taking care of herself. And, because she always says, I can't believe you're not a diabetic yet. Like everybody in our family is a diabetic. And it's like, everybody that was a diabetic because they didn't take care of themselves. And so it's just trying to help people with that mindset that our path of disease is not pre-written. Like we can change these things. There are very few conditions that are just genetically encoded in us and we're going to get them no matter what we do. Very, very few.
So you talk about root cause medicine. That would be another classification of what you get to do, or that's how you look at it?
Yeah, and root cause medicine or cellular medicine, I was joking with a patient that's been with me for quite a few years the other day, and that is that when I started getting into root cause medicine or cellular medicine, by the way, we're made up of trillions of cells. As you and I've talked about, we turn over millions and billions of these cells every day. And from biology class, we know that we start with all these little bitty microscopic cells, and the better that they communicate and function, the better off we are health wise. And unfortunately, as we age, these cells start to deteriorate. They can become senescence, which is a term that you and I have talked about before, which is a zombie-like state, because our cells are supposed to do their job, do them properly. If they don't do it properly, our body's supposed to repair it, or it's supposed to knock it out, kill it, and be done with it. But unfortunately, as we get older, these senescent cells, which is the state of a cell that's hung out to dry, that should be dead but still alive, so that's why we call them zombie cells, they start hanging out. And as we get more and more of those, that's what leads to more and more chronic disease. And so we can, and many patients, if they're willing, we can start going back and really trying to figure out what is actually causing their true problem, especially if we can start early before they have actually got these diseases. Like that's where the advanced labs comes in. We can see changes early on. We can predict diabetes many years before they have diabetes so that we can make a few. And that's what I really love is you can make very minor alterations, things that patients don't feel are painful, that they don't feel like really negatively affects their life in any way. But then they can see those results in 6 months or 12 months, that we're changing things on labs, objective data that we can show them that it's improving, and that just causes them to buy in. And there's many ways to approach that. But, as I tell my patients, again, going back to that traditional model, I've got 12 to 15 minutes, try getting down to cellular medicine or root cause medicine someone in 12 minutes, in the back of your brain as a provider, knowing I'm already 45 minutes behind today. So really, I hate to say it, like you're in that room, but your brain's already kind of moving on to the next room because you're like, oh my God, the next room, I got to do this. And oh my God, I've got Mr. Smith in 30 minutes and he takes always 30 minutes, and that's just how your day goes when you're in that traditional practice. And we probably will get into it later. Then you're even bound by what the insurance company will even let you do at the end of the day. And then there's just the mindset of the traditional practice. Most of those patients have that traditional practice mindset. They don't want to do anything different either. I mean, I hate to say it, but I always joke, but they're like, kind of like, okay, you said I've got this. What's the script for that? What's the script? And as I've told you before, when I became a doctor in 1998, the first treatment for type 2 diabetes was dietary and nutrition and exercise. That's completely gone now. The first treatment for diabetes is multiple medications upon diagnosis. Like, oh, Steve, you're a diabetic. Here's your ACE inhibitor, here's your statin, here's your diabetic medicine. Like, son of a gun, I came in for a lab review and left with 4 prescriptions.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what if we went back with that patient, and depending on how bad that, well, first of all, if I'm doing my job properly, unless it's a brand new patient to me, I should have seen this coming for years, right? And I should have intervened years ago. And of course, the patient has to be on board with this. Certainly, occasionally we have patients that won't do anything we say. They usually fall off out of the practice fairly quickly. But for the most part, our patients do what we say. I should have caught this way in advance, and I could have done the things that I needed to intervene to never end up in that spot. But even if they come to me and they're diabetics, let's try and, okay, let's do things to treat the diabetes, but let's also do things to try to reverse the diabetes. It's something that's not talked about much in America, is how type 2 diabetes is for the most part a reversible disease. We just give up. We're just like, well, you're diabetic. Forget about that pot belly you have. We're going to leave that alone. We're just going to go ahead and give you these medications to make your A1C, which is your 90-day blood sugar test, on paper look good again. And then if that's the case, we're all happy and we're going to move on, which, by the way, the standards that we set for good control of diabetes is still quite poor.
Wow.
You're still going to get long-term negative effects. It's just going to be a little slower than if your A1C was worse than that. I mean, the parameters that we say are good control are, in my opinion, ridiculous. And so, but it is what it is.
Wow. So, I think the thing that really made an impression on me, where the light bulb went off, was there's a responsibility I have in this relationship with my provider. And it should be that I want to show up and do what work I need to do to improve my health, other than just show up, I guess, the way that we've been programmed to just go, okay, what's my sentence?
Yeah.
And what penance do I have to pay, as far as what
Yeah.
medication do I need to take?
Yeah. And like right before I jumped on this podcast, I had a new potential concierge patient that came in, and we were talking, and what I was, and by the way, like, I don't even advertise my concierge practice because we really want to be picky in that program. I as much want to pick them as they pick me. Like I may have told you the story. Like, I interviewed a new CPA like a year ago, and I thought I was interviewing her, but she was interviewing me as well. And at the end, I was like, well, I think I want to move forward. And she's like, well, I think I agree. I think I'll accept you too. I was like, oh crap, she was interviewing me too. And, I had no idea. I thought I was interviewing her, but, I think that is how I look at my concierge program. It's basically like the patient's interviewing me, I'm interviewing them. And at the end of it, we may decide we're not a match or we are a match. And what I mean by that is if someone's not willing to take an active role in their health, I don't want them as a patient. No offense meant. I have a plenty to keep me busy. I don't want to waste my time on the patient that doesn't really want our help. That I would rather give that time to someone who wants to do what they need to do, because I can't really help anyone if all they want is a script. If that's your level of involvement in your health, is a script, probably not or probably just not a match. The good news is I think the population percentage is growing, that with the education at all of our fingertips, with all the podcasts and blogs and websites, we won't debate how much is reputable or not, but at least it's got people thinking of what can I do differently. I mean, there's so many great podcasts out there, in my opinion, that actually most of them are non-doctors. Like you and I talk, there's very few doctors doing good podcasts out there, but there's still some good information that that will bring into me, and allows them to get invested in their own health. And so many of these things are so small, just little small things that we can do. So anyway, that's what I was telling the patient is like, my goal is not to come in and say, okay, Jane Doe, you're going to do A, B, C, D, E, and F and come back in 2 months. It's, here's some different options. Let's talk about what they are. Let's talk about the pros and cons. Let's have a conversation. And then let's let you pick what you think works best for your lifestyle. And as I tell my patients, the only time I balk is if I think it's unsafe or it won't help them at all. So that we can choose together. And this patient actually chose not to do hormone replacement today. She wanted to do some other things. So, okay, let's try this and we'll reassess in 3 months and see where we're at. So, I think there's just, and by the way, I spent an hour and 10 minutes with that patient, new
Mm.
patient. Again, never would have had that time in my old practice. I mean, nurses would have been banging down the door and, wanting to kill me because they're not going to have lunch that day. So just differences in practices.
So I think one part of your story that's really interesting to me that I didn't think about until you told it one day, but there's a aspect of the stress from a traditional practice management that impacts your health personally,
Sure.
but also the health of your family, meaning the health of the relationships. And
Yeah.
it comes to this sanity thing almost.
Yeah, I mean, very few people can unpack their stress and head home and enter the front door all stress free. At least I wasn't that person. So my day dictated the mood when I walked in the front door or the garage, and then that then had an impact on my small kids because at that time I had small children. My son just turned 18 last week, so they were, again, these were like 4, 5, 6 year olds, two of them walking, into the room, and they're expecting to see dad and they're happy to see dad and they're wanting to play and do things. But your energy level is low. Your mental energy is really low. I mean, if it probably, honestly, if I'd have had my preference, it'd be go home and have a silent house for the first like 2 hours or so. Um, and that's not even taking in my own health into it, and the issues I was having health wise. I'm just talking about mental health. And then it causes marital problems. There's just no way that it can't because you don't feel good mentally. You're just mentally exhausted. I know very few PCPs in the traditional world that are busy, and pretty much all of them are, that say they go home with just, man, full of energy and happy. And I'm sure there's some out there, and God bless them. They probably just haven't done it long enough yet to be burned out, but God bless them if they really do, because we certainly need them. They play a vital role. I'm never going to say that we don't need those docs out there doing that.
So when you're not treating the outcome, my take from your story is like you're actually you're doing a better job for your patient, but you're also it's impacting you and your family.
Hmm.
Because deep down there's this conflict of your Hippocratic oath, right? But
Yeah.
you're in a situation, the most unhappiest time I ever had in my professional career was when I was in a job where felt I didn't have any autonomy and I wasn't able to make changes that improved the situation. I had to just accept
Hmm.
boundaries and it made me very unhappy. And it seems like in a traditional medicine world, that environment exists, does it not?
Sure. I mean, I had this vision of going to medical school that I was going to help all these people. And looking back, I know I really did help a lot of people, and I'm by no means trying to discount what we did for, when I say we, I mean myself and my other providers and those providers that are still in that exact clinic today. They are helping people. Okay. By no means am I saying that they're not. I'm just saying that at the end of the day, I was lacking that fulfillment that I was looking for when I went to medical school. I didn't feel like I really changed people's lives in the way that I wanted to change them. Certainly, I know I made a huge impact on a lot of those patients' lives in a positive way. And I'm very thankful for those relationships I had. But I get more satisfaction now out of seeing, patients when we really take away a condition, or like simple things like I actually seen today, he's in his 80s and had horrible back pain, and we did a few things with peptides and his back pain has now gone away, and he's back to doing everything that he was doing prior. I mean, those and such simple things, and he's like, how did you do this? And like, for us it's pretty simple, but we look like a hero, when you take a guy in his 80s, you take his back pain away, and he's a car guy, and so now he's able to get back out there and wrench on his cars and do all the stuff that he likes to do. I mean, mean, that's so cool to me. That's why I do this. And again, those relationships that we create. I mean, like I really know this patient. Heck, he every single time he brings a car up here, and they always know to give me a couple minutes after he's here because we're going to go look at his car and talk about
Mm.
his car and stuff like that because he collects cars. Just things that I never could do in my old practice that I really enjoy with this practice.
Wow. I think when the light bulb went off for me is like you described the cellular medicine, and in my head I was envisioning, that The Walking Dead, that series,
Hmm.
those zombies, that's your cells walking around in your body
Hmm.
causing trouble,
Yeah.
right?
Havoc.
And
Yeah, exactly.
and so you were helping me understand how my diet, peptides, ketone esters, fasting, how this really impacted the health of the cells, that they could do their job, that they're really brilliant and amazingly designed to do that. And it was like a big light bulb went on me. But I think the elephant in the room of this whole thing in a traditional practice is the insurance, and how insurance is dictating, at least from my perspective, how many physicians have to practice medicine.
Yeah, and I always say, like, in my opinion, when you in an insurance model, you work for the insurance company because at the end of the day, you're going to end up doing what the insurance company wants you to do. And in my humble opinion, again, it's just Dr. Chris's opinion, the insurance company is not really invested in your best outcomes. They're really invested in what do I have to do, but at the same time keep my cost as low as possible. Um, again, I don't remember any health insurances going out of business. They cry poverty, but if you look at their if you look at their financials, it's amazing how much profit they make. And so, these commercial insurances do quite well. And how do they do that? Well, they do things. I'll never forget, like, a guy one time I saw, and he was actually a friend of mine, and he was carrying some ski equipment, like typical dad, had, like, two kids and the wife, and had all their ski gear loaded on himself going upstairs, and he slipped and fell and had immediate severe back pain down his leg. And he came in, he got through his trip and came in, and he had an obvious herniated disc. And I remember I ordered an MRI of his lumbar spine so we could see how bad it was. And the insurance said that it wouldn't be approved for 60 days until we did like anti-inflammatories and muscle relaxants and all these things. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, it's an obvious we need this MRI. And luckily, the guy could afford it. I said, hey, man, I can try and fight your insurance and see if we can get this done. Or you can go pay cash for $425 and just get the MRI. And he, of course, like said, I'll just go pay cash and go get the MRI. And, 2 hours later, we had the MRI. But that's just a little snapshot of like what you do. They're like, no, we're not doing an MRI today, even though as a clinician, you need it. It's needed so that I knew how to properly treat him from that point on. And of course, he did have the bad herniated disc. And, actually, I would treat it differently now than I treated it then. But, I did what I knew. But again, that's just a little mini example of what would happen all day long. And I mean, it's just like, and like I've told you before on these podcasts, you try to put up the valiant fight, but at some point, you're like, I just don't want to fight the insurance anymore. Like, you just kind of give in. It's just like, I don't have the time to be on the phone with all these people or doing prior auths. So okay, we'll do it your way. We'll just give them these scripts and they can come back in a month and see if it's better, and that's just what you do.
I call that stupid taxes. When I think about your employees that come to work, the first day they show up, they're like, I'm going to be the best employee for you, Dr. Kris, right?
Mhm.
But then they run into this stupid rule that doesn't make sense. And the first thing they think, oh, that's kind of stupid. Then they go, oh, I'm going to be a good employee, so I'll just accept it. But over time, the more they run into, the more it degrades their enthusiasm for that position, right?
Right. Yeah.
And it seems
Agreed.
like the traditional medical provider has millions of stupid taxes in their way.
Hmm. Couldn't agree more.
Wow.
Absolutely.
So now you find yourself in your private, your cash pay practice. What are some of the things that you see in your employees, your patients? Just kind of touch on, do a compare and contrast.
Well, so um, traditional practice, high volume, low yield. And what I mean by that is you got to see a lot of patients with low per patient return financially. Huge staffs. I always tell providers, when you go from a traditional to a cash pay practice, you'll be able to cut your staff 50 to 75% most likely, because you just have so much staff dedicated to insurance billing and that sort of thing, unless you outsource all of that. um, you know the things we've already discussed with patients, being able to spend more time with them, able to really get better knowledge of what's going on with them, depending on your education level. As far as my staff goes, I always joke, we're really lucky. We have very, very few what I would call unhappy customers, right? Like, and when it is, it's usually just somebody who's having a bad day and they decide to take it out on whoever's here, or sometimes I think that they just don't know how to talk to, not my employees, the patients just don't talk to people in a very nice way, and it's sometimes taken as they're really rude when maybe they are, but that's just their personality. And I always joke, like, sometimes if I'm kind of aggravated, I'm like, maybe you should go to the old clinic and work for half a day. You'll encounter a person an hour that's 3 times as bad as what you just ran into, because the truth is when you truly don't feel good, there's a lot of people that just aren't real nice. I mean, that's just the easiest way I can say it. They woke up every day, they wake up feeling like shit, and they're going to come in and they're going to be grumpy and gruff, and then you get some people that, I hate to say it, but because they have insurance, they think in some way you work for them,
Mm,
like, hey, I paid a copay today. Like, okay, like, great. That's what you legally have to do, like, you don't owe me because you paid a $20 copay. And it's really funny, in a cash practice, even though they're paying a lot more money, they seem to grasp the concept of, we're working together, versus, I'm here for a service and you need to do my service, and, give me my shot or give me my script for antibiotics or whatever. And I find that to be a really big difference in the patient profiles. But for the most part, I think that we have very happy employees. They, especially my ones that did work in that environment before, um, I think they really appreciate this environment so much more, because they're the same way for them. They're able to get to know the patients better. They get to have relationships with the patients. They're not, none of myself or my providers will ever be seeing 30 people a day. We just physically don't have that kind of time, and that's not what we do. So just, again, just kind of that overall less stress has a positive impact on the whole practice, including the employees.
well, excellent. So the providers that are listening to these conversations, obviously, it's going through their mind. This is something that they have to think about from time to time. Should I transition my practice? And so if they were to reach out to you, what does it look like if you guys chat?
Oh, I just, I start everything I'm a very casual person anyway. It's just a conversation. I always like to try to just get to know their situation a little bit better. Spend 10, 15 minutes just letting them talk about them, and kind of where they're at and what they envision and doing. Every situation is different. There is no cookie cutter for this. Again, like I was talking about with you the other day, if I'd have started this, like some of my counterparts I know really well that are in just like these prime spots in America, it's such an easier conversion, right? If you're in Boca Raton, Florida, versus Weatherford, Texas, it's a no brainer in my opinion. So there's just different things to think about, but there's practices that are viable in very small rural areas. It's just, it's not all about money, but sometimes it comes down to, like, what do you love and what do you have to do? What do you have to financially make at the end of the day to make everybody happy? And just trying to kind of work through that on, what might work for that person.
Yeah. So, and then I'm sure it's in the back of their mind, maybe I should get Dr. Kris to be my provider to help me focus on my lifestyle and the things that I need to do to improve. Um, they would go to the researchclinic.com.
Yeah, that's the easiest place to start. As you know, hit one of the schedule a consultation buttons and it'll walk them through the process.
Yeah. And so he's picky. He wants folks that want to own their part of the journey. In that it becomes a more fulfilling for both sides. And as I can attest, my labs look awesome
Yeah, we
compared
like to
to,
just start everybody with an evaluation, and then at that point, no commitment, just an evaluation, labs and a visit with myself or one of the providers. And then at that point, we can all decide if we're a good fit for each other. As I say, if we're not, we'll leave friends. No hard feelings either way. But if we can help you, we'll tell you what we can do for you. And then, the patients can take that and do what they want with it at that point.
all right. So Dr. Kris's practices, the researchclinic.com. It's in Weatherford, Texas. And you can
In
learn
Nashville.
more in Nashville. Yeah, that's exciting.
Yep.
And you can learn more about Dr. Kris. Maybe you need him to come speak to your conference or whatever your gathering is. And his website is drkris.life. That's Dr. Kris with a KRIS .life, LIFE. And that's a DR too. That's kind of this doctor word. You got to make sure you get it right. Dr. Kris, excellent conversation. I enjoyed it. Is there any last words?
No, I think we hit all the high points. I think it was a good conversation. I just thank you for your time.
All right. And that's a wrap. Thanks for joining the Dr. Kris podcast. If you learned something today and you want to connect and get more information, visit our website, www.drkris.life, where you can find more great information or even schedule a time to learn how you can engage with Dr. Kris. Be sure to follow, like, share, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Dr. Kris podcast.